When we are born, there is a special blank page waiting for us to write our story and, in a sense, take our place on history's page. Our record of existence, that is, our lived experience, is our individual component of the overall social history of this island. Yes, your story is very important to Barbados, and we are pleased to share that story with the world. A very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. This week we have returned to the north of the island, and the spotlight now falls on the community of Rosehill in St. Peter, as seen through the lens of Major Patrick Skeete. Take it over, Major.
When we were young, we lived in Rosehill, St. Peter, and there were like plantations like Allendale Plantation, Ebworth, were the two plantations that we were sort of sandwiched between. And most of our life was sort of tied up in what happened at the plantation. On mornings, I would see people pass on the road with hose over the shoulder and dumb baskets on the head, heading off the plantation. Of course, the bell would go at 6 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock you hear the bell, and people are heading towards the plantation. So at that time, we were not really aware of other professions like lawyers and whatever else. Most of the people we knew were ordinary people from like the plantation setting. And we lived a very sheltered life. When I first passed to go to Commerce School at age 10, it was probably maybe the 5th time I had been to Bridgetown. Because every year, your mother would go to town and she'd buy shoes for you. Some years she would take you, but when that became too inconvenient, she just simply draw your foot, your shoe. They just put a piece of card on your foot and draw out your foot and take that to town. And you wouldn't go to town for that year. So that, whereas most children now are going to town many times, we went to town probably about 5 times in that period from age 1 to age 10. So I know how to learn how to get to the Bushell bus stand in Bridgetown, where they went to town. Right? So we take a lot of things for granted. In those days, you were close-knit between St. Lucie and St. Joseph Hospital to the west, more or less. And then there was the St. Lucie Church. And you didn't venture to go too far beyond those points, really. So you spent all your time in gullies, playing cricket, playing dominoes, playing tennis in the road, right? But seldom really got a chance to go further. And the only time I went further was when there was a picnic or excursion, where people from Rosehill would have gone like to Bath or places really far away, like Bath or Congreve Bay or wherever.
And those excursions provided the opportunity for people to fellowship with each other and learn of other communities on our island. Now, the notion of travelling from Rosehill in St. Peter to a community in St. Philip for an excursion, it brings to mind the idea of transportation. What about public transportation in Major Skeete's days?
Buses would pass from time to time, like long distances apart, like an hour or so apart. And there's on the hour like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock and so on. Few people had cars. We could play in the road because many cars didn't pass in the road too often during the day. So you could play cricket in the road or throw balls and so on across the road. And we used to spend a lot of time actually sitting out with a book, waiting to capture the numbers of SL trucks, like sugar trucks or trucks taking molasses. So we spent a lot of time trying to work out who would be the one to have the most numbers in a given day. So when you hear a truck coming, you run outside with the book to write the number, right? But we actually had a lot to engage ourselves. We had no toys, so we had to make them. So all those things and so on, like sardine tins or whatever, we'd actually put like cord into them and pull them as trucks. Some people got ingenious, like my neighbor called Dougie. He was a Whitley. The Whitleys they lived about 2 or 3 houses away from ours. And he had this factory. And it was really ingenious. He actually has steam coming out of it. He had we would build these trucks looking like the exact replicas of the trucks from the plantations. There were some people in my group that liked Austin type trucks, and some people preferred Bedfords. So you'd make the truck looking like the one that you liked, and they were almost identical. They just looked at the trucks. I said, I think I could make it as there, They would take like a corned beef can and make that like the mouth of the truck, and then sort of tweak it to look more and paint it to look more like the Bedford. Then they would look at the railings and put railings up the side of the truck. They even put on springs. They would take some metal parts and make them into springs for the wheels, Springs underneath the wheels were just like on the truck. And I think it was like really, really good. One person who was very good at that was the late Glennon Edwards, my best friend at primary school. Glennon made a truck for me one time that was identical to the Austin trucks from the factory. Perfectly like them. All from discarded tins and whatever else, It was an exact replica. But he was very good. He was very good at using his hands. So you would have railings, and you then drive around the neighborhood. And when people were sucking cane and they peeled it off and threw it by the side of the road, it is those same cane peelings that were dried that you took up and put on your truck. And you took them to the factory. You would have this thing to pull the truck, turn it to the factory, and you actually got this money, which is really what we call sweetie paper. And change would be like cut plates broken up to form change. And you go back feeling really wealthy. And all the cane peelings are at Dougie's house. And if anybody was concerned about that, the youngsters probably did not understand why, because as far as they're concerned, they were at a factory. But I realized now that they were actually making that home a lot more dirty in a sense with all these things around the house, right? But, play was seasonal. There were sometimes you play cricket for virtually a whole day. Just like cricketers, you went up to the gully, you played cricket, you came home out for lunch, and went back out after lunch and played till 5 or 6. And most of the times you played until somebody in the group who owned the bat decided, I'm not out. And if you decide not to bowl at that person, said, okay, the bat is mine. He put the bat across his shoulder, and he goes off into the distance and gone home with the bat. Next day, all the people come back, and everybody shout, you ready? And you're ready to go. And nobody remembers that yesterday it ended with somebody being unfair, right? But it was what made life interesting in that you just kept on every day. And of course, we improved the bats over time. First, we had like coconut limbs, and then we learned how to build better bats. And even with the balls, we used to use like wet some paper and so on, and then put rubber strands from the tire of a bicycle around them. Some people even put a rock to make it more hard, but that could be a bit dangerous sometimes. But of course, some of those places are overgrown now because nobody does any of that anymore. But the village life was like neighborly. If somebody comes to your house today and they bring you yams or they bring you potatoes, whatever, if you came to my father's house, he would give you a hand of bananas or avocados or whatever, pears we used to call them. And generally people looked out for each other. Of course, going to primary school in that area too. If you passed people, you had to say good morning, be respectful, because if you didn't, your parents were here. And your parents value the advice from adults more than yours, so that you have to be very careful what you say to older people at the time. I always tell my wife that we actually used to walk to school barefooted in the first number of years. Then eventually you had something called dog muscles that you wore, right? But I remember there are a lot of people who walked to school barefooted, and you had to walk like on the side of the road with the grass when the road got too hot, right? We also had a slate that we carried to school on which you did everything. You had a pencil and you wrote everything on the slate. So you didn't have like all these exercise books that they have now. That one slate was used for everything that you did. So you like had a pencil that you actually wrote, not the normal pencil that we have now, but it was designed for a slate. So things have changed a great deal in many different ways. We used to fly kites at Easter time, and there are a lot of varieties of things that we did. Like we would actually send like things up to the kite and say we send a message, or sometimes people put a razor on their kite and then they make sure that they bring their kite close to yours. And so we spent many days actually going looking for our own kite that had broken away and gone very, very far in the distance. So a great part of your day was actually taken up quite often in going to retrieve your own kite. We had a thing put on the kite that used to make a sound and sort of like almost sing. But the most challenging thing was when the kite started to spin and going to spin, and then you couldn't get it out of the spin. Sometimes even the length of the tail of the kite can make a difference. If you put it on too long, it will not go up too well. And if it's too short, it would tend to spin around and crash to the ground. So we had a lot of experiences. Of course, in the early days, we made our own kite using something called clamatory, fruit from a tree that was gummy, and it actually paste it on. Or sometimes you use flour and mix the paste, and it would harden and use like newspaper to paste on the sides of the kite. That's when you couldn't really buy a kite, so you had to make your own. A big activity where we were very small was pitching marbles. You had like three holes dug, and you start a line and you pitch the marble, and we played a game called Killer. So you have to pitch and get the marble into the first hole, and then in the second hole, and when you get to the third hole, you're considered to get into the third hole. Wherever the marble landed, you would have to be able to get in on the first try, right? So once you got into you were called a killer. So you could then place your marble close to the hole, and anybody who attempted to come near the hole, you had the right to actually hit their marble, and they'd be dead, and they'd have to withdraw from the game. That's why it's called killer. But one of the biggest games we had was one where you had to pitch for movie pictures. There were 100 pictures of movie stars, westerns, from 1 to 100, with people like Lester Rowe and John Wayne or whatever. I suspect that the people who made them never gave all 100. You know, like you kept on wanting to get a particular one, and number 76 or whatever, and you never seem to get it in the money trying to buy, or how many games you play, you never get the number 76 or whatever. So when you buy bubble gum, in the bubble gum would be a picture of a cowboy. So you would actually buy the bubble gum, not only to chew the bubble gum, but to get the picture. So when you go to pitch now, you're going with your collection of pictures. So if you hit the person's marble, you would actually get 1 or 2 or 3, and he'd have to give you 1 or 2 or 3. And the aim was to collect all 100 in the series. But there are some people who would actually have old pictures, like really torn up pictures, and they will come to you with your brand new pictures, and when you actually win against them, they give you the old ones. But the aim at the end of the day was to have the full line of 100 pictures to show that you have all 100 pictures. Now you think about it, when you're older, you realize that it didn't really make any sense to have all the pictures of the stars. What did it really matter? But for us, it mattered because we wanted to build the collection. So that was a big thing at some point in terms of pitching marbles. But also, it was a good really good days.
Traditionally, there is a day set aside on which we formally and collectively celebrate our mothers. My community, however, provides that opportunity for everyone to do just that every week. Now, because of her invaluable contribution to the community, it would be remiss of Major Skeete if he were to speak of his childhood community without celebrating the contribution of his mother, whose work was always beautifully exhibited on ladies in the north of the island.
My mother's name was Marcia Skeete. She was Jilts. We all came from the Ben family, and she was a needle worker, and she was really good at what she did. And a lot of people liked her dresses, the way she made her dresses. And there were big occasions where if she had a bride that she made a dress for, when the bride was ready to leave the house to go to get into the car, there'd be a lot of people outside watching on. So I had got accustomed as a youngster for those days when brides were leaving our house, that we see a lot of people, all of them would say to my mother, she looks so sweet, She looked so sweet. And my mother would just smile. But I think that she just enjoyed doing what she did. But she had a good reputation being a very good seamstress. She also taught a lot of people how to do needlework. She had her own interns, if you want to call them that. People would send their daughters to her to learn, and she would spend some time putting dresses on the table and showing them how to do different types of cuts, how to cut it in different styles. But yes, but she was very good at what she did.
Imagine that. Shouldn't that be the wish of all of us? That when we are gone from this world, we are remembered for being very good at what we did in our quest to leave behind a better Barbados than what we found.
The shops in the area were the key thing for people in my area. They provided everything that you wanted. There was a shop, a man called Harvey, and there was also Jordan. Jordan would be the grandfather of the current minister, Minister of Government, right? He had his shop, and his son Clifford then took over the shop later, right? All the while that he was there, he was assisting his father, right? And this Colin Jordan's grandfather and father. And that was one of the main shops in Rose Hill. So just about everything that you needed, sugar, salt, meat, salt, fish, whatever. So to a large extent, you didn't really need to leave Rose Hill and go to Spice Town really for things that you needed. You could survive that way. But what is important about some of these shops is that they gave people sort of like credit. In other words, you could go to the shop and buy something, and you could ask the owner of the shop to allow you to take them without paying. And they'd write down your name on a piece of paper, and you'll pay them according to, pay them when you're ready, you have the money. So that helped a lot of people because they never had enough money to buy these things anyhow. So they were given that type of arrangement where they could just charge it, just get it and pay later. Since you couldn't go to town as often, those itinerant salesmen would come to your neighborhood every week. And people again survived because of those, they would sell materials and so on to people. So they were like bolts of cloth and other things, mainly related to linens and cloth and whatever. And, they pay back a little bit. And they had a card that would actually write off what was paid and so on. But there are many instances where, when the coolie men came, we called them coolie men at the time, even though I found out later that that's not really a good term to use. And sometimes the parents of the children would tell them, I'm not at home, right? And the coolie man knew that they were just telling lies, But people would buy these things, but then when it's time to pay back, they would have some real difficulty in paying. I would sometimes try to get away when the person came. But yeah, the Kulima would still continue to bring them. As I said, I use the term, but I know that it is not considered to be a good term, but that's what we actually used when we were growing up.
Now, what about festive occasions and the associated celebrations?
Christmas was a very special time to us. It was, of course, the only time for the year that you'd actually get a chance to have ham. I think that's what made a big difference. It was also a time that you would see friends or family who had been to America or England and who would come back to Barbados, especially for Christmas season, and come to church. I used to go to All Saints Anglican Church, and we always look forward to seeing people there on Christmas Day. But most important, like Christmas Eve night, it was always the question of waiting anxiously to get your gifts. My mother would buy the gifts and put them on top of a cupboard, and you spend the whole month wondering what the gift was. And then, of course, you'd have the countdown. The radio would say every day, it's only 20 shopping days before Christmas. And they keep on the countdown. And it made it almost like something special, that there was something special happening because of the countdown. And I remember also that early morning, the top band from the area would come out like really early before we woke up, like before people woke up. And they would play this music. And they would not leave your house until they got money donated to them. They would sing and sing and sing. And the moment you gave them a donation, then they would quickly come to an end. But they would have all these little sayings. There was always someone in the group who used to talk a lot. I would say things like Christmas comes but once a year, and everyone must have this share, right? And all sort of things that I think people like Punk and so have mentioned in their songs. But so there was a lot to really look forward to. What I remember though, at a very early stage, is that you had to go into the quarry and bring down buckets of marl, white marl, and put it around the house. No house would be complete on Christmas Day without marl all around the house. And I often wondered why, right? But looking at postcards now, or Christmas cards with ice, like in like North America and Canada, I wonder if people were trying to sort of create the same environment as for the white Christmas in other countries. Because there was not a way to explain why you put marl all around the house. It was creating the same white pattern of what snow used to do in other countries, right? But every single child had to go and bring that marl, the bucket from the quarry. And the quarry was a good little distance away. You had to go up an incline to get to the quarry. So you had to make a number of trips because you had no containers that could really carry all at one time. And then on Christmas Day, everybody from the neighborhood is coming to your house for their Christmas. They just simply say, I come from a Christmas, right? And that meant that you get probably a little piece of the ham and malls or whatever outside. But I often wondered how many people could actually eat that one ham, you know what I mean? How many people could one ham serve? Because there was not a family at home decided they want to eat and they have plenty of days to eat it. They were sharing it with the whole neighborhood. So the thing was to come and say, I've come from a Christmas. That means I'm coming for whatever you have to give me for Christmas. It meant ham or pudding or cake or whatever. In those days, there was a pudding that was really, really very thick, very rich. And it was interesting to see how families were able to share. We'd only thought about the fact that the ham was going to be going less and less as you go on. There were hams, of course, that you had to hang up in the house. That they had like a sort of skin over them. And some took a long, long time to boil. But there were different variations of hams that we had compared to the fact now that we have our own hams being done here in Barbados and so on. But in those days, I believe they might have been imported, so they came in these special type of skin preservative type thing. But yeah, it was exciting. And then during the day, you enjoy playing with your toys.
Well, the ingenuity and creativity of our people were displayed in various areas of their lives. One such way was their accumulation of funds for their children's education.
When we were young, you had to pay school fees you had to pay for books. So even though you had free education, parents had to find money to pay for the books. So sometimes you go to friends who had the book last year and buy the book if it's in pretty good condition. In order to get that, some parents had to raise pigs and so on. So every weekend, you would hear about a pig being killed. And people would do what you call, the word used was engage, meaning you would say to the person, I like a leg, or I like 5 pounds, or whatever. Sometimes I wondered if there were that many pounds of meat in one pig, but everybody wanted legs or whatever. And when the Saturday morning came, they would kill the pig, and then people would turn up and they would go and get their piece of meat. Of course, in those days there were no refrigerators, so you had to get the meat fresh, right? So that most of the people tended to get the meat just before it was ready to be prepared. Refrigerators came in later, but before that, you used to use salt to actually preserve meat. It's interesting that every year during the crop season, you would hear about the heartman, and you would actually be told, don't go say that at night, right? And because the heartman is going to come for you. But it only happened during the time that the kings were fairly high. And we realized that it was just a way of maybe keeping us quiet, but people actually believed that the person existed, that the heartman existed. It sort of disappeared as people got more and more educated, I suppose. Right? When you moved away from your own neighborhood, you then didn't have that particular challenge to deal with. By the time it was 10 years I'm going to come here, there was no longer the thought of coming home late and heartman is going to. So I think that it eventually died out, but in the early days, we were so afraid of a heartman, and there were stories of people who went missing, and people assumed it was the heartman. But nobody knows what really happened, but it's a big mystery.
And that is what makes it so interesting, the unknown. Those ongoing debates as to whether such existed or not. Those unsettled arguments. Well, the debate continues, so too does my community. We'll be back next week at the same time for the continuation of the series. In the meantime, do take good care of yourself and look out for the interests of your neighbors. I'm Sherwood.